As the sun sets. Never in my years of admiration would I think that I would be caressing the cheeks of the man I yearned for. A few days ago, my father came home from work with a frown on his face. I didn't take it seriously, thinking he had just a long day at work, so I prepared our dinner swiftly, putting the plates on our table and took the meat out of the oven. "Hi, Dad, how was work?" I noticed his frown getting deeper. "Hey, Dad, everything all right?" I asked in an attempt to ease his mood. "Sit down, son. I must tell you something." Although quite hesitantly, I sat down. "My boss, he had decided to cut some people off," my dad started. I don't understand, Dad. What do you mean?" I asked. "He had decided to cut people off. He wanted to rebrand the company and equipped it with younger employees to boost popularity in the youth market. Today was my, last day," he struggled to say. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I know how you loved working for Philippe, but," I trailed off. "How are we supposed to pay the bills? I mean, not to mention the money for my college education. I'm in my 3rd year. I'm almost there, Dad," I said, tearing up. As much as I wanted Dad to stay at home, there was a reason why we can't afford for him to stay here. He needed to work for our needs. "I know, my son. That's why I pleaded with Philippe. I know he wanted young employees, so I advertised," he said so hesitantly. "I advertised for you, Richard. I don't want to hear another word from my dad, so I told him that I needed time to think about it. I needed some air, Dad. This is kind of a big thing. I'll just think about it for a while. I'll just go outside for a few," I told him. He reluctantly agreed as it was getting late, but at this point, there's nothing he could do about it, so I took my jacket and started to walk outside. "Just make sure you get home, okay? I don't want what happened last time to happen again," he said with concern, evident on his voice. The thing that he didn't want to happen again is still a mystery to me. He doesn't like to talk about it, even when I practically begged him to tell me. But the strangest thing is that he can't seem to remember it. The only thing I can recall is a blurry man, a dark restaurant, and a faint conversation. The next thing I knew, I woke up in the hospital with a bandage on my head. The whole night just went from 0 to 100. I didn't exactly process the fact that my dad had just got laid off from his job yet. Then suddenly he tells me that he recommended me to Philippe. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love having my dad at home, but the bills get pretty racked up and I'm still in college. I didn't know how far I already was and where I was supposed to go, but somehow my feet ended up at the building that just fired my dad. I stared at it for quite some time until a black car parked itself right in front of the entrance where I stood. A lone figure then exited the doors of the building as he was escorted to the car. "That must be Philippe," I said to myself. Somehow, I never tore my gaze from him. As I was about to, I was greeted by the green orbs that looked like they had gone years of yearning, and finally found the thing that they had yearned for. He never took his eyes away from me, and I started to feel something on my stomach. Maybe it was because I didn't eat dinner, but it looked like he was about to say something to me. But his escorts quickly gestured for him to enter the car. I followed the car until it vanished into the sea of traffic. I was still glued to the pavement thinking, what the hell just happened? I've never seen Philippe in the flesh, but why did he look so oddly familiar? I started my journey back to the house, and not once has his orbs left my mind. Maybe working for him wouldn't be so bad after all. As we were getting ready for bed, I tried to distract myself from the scene that took place minutes ago. By now, I have been doing this for quite a few hours now, but the thought of him still lingers. I would be lying if I said I didn't appreciate him being in my thoughts, but isn't it tiring to be running in my mind all day? Okay, maybe I shouldn't tell him that, or to anyone else for that matter. Hours went by and I didn't realize I fell asleep on my desk. "Oh my god, I'm late!" I shrieked. I rushed to the bathroom and hurriedly showered, hoping I wouldn't be late for school. It's during these times that I'm amazed at myself for doing a lot of things at the same time. Exhibit A, showering while brushing my teeth. As I finished my morning routine, I spared no time bolting out the door, almost forgetting I have a full-time father now. "Richard, not so fast please," he shouted. "Sorry, Dad, but I'm running late now," I said to him while I made my way out the door. "Just hold on for a moment and sit down. I have to tell you something," he said so softly, making me quite nervous. "Richard, I just got word from the office that the new recruits are going to start tomorrow." "Yep, after I went back home yesterday, I told my dad about the decision I made." "Tomorrow? Well, what time, Dad? I still have classes, you know," I asked, while my hand looked for the toast on the table. I never really liked the scenes where the teenager just bolts through the door without eating the amazing breakfast their parents made for them. We can't afford to be that wasteful. "Hello, Earth to Richard, Dad to Richard." God, I must have been lost in my own mind again. You were saying, Dad? I said while I ate the toast. I said I knew you had class, so I asked if you could put you in the afternoon schedule. Right, knowing my dad, he always finds ways. Thanks, Dad. I'll be on my way now, I said as I made my way through the garage to get my bike. I always loved to be out in the open. I guess that's one of the reasons why I opted for a bicycle. Maybe because this is the closest thing I could grasp to being out in the open. With every pedal, I'm reminded to be careful, as it taught me that each gaze upon me might be a judgment, or with every word to describe me could possibly be an adjective of disgust. All of those things anguish me every waking moment. I love like everyone else. It just so happens that I love to love the same gender as me. It pains me that I could never tell my dearest father about this. I've grown to think that I owe this to him, in adoration of the countless sacrifices he made. I wish my mother was here to see how strong her little boy came to be. I didn't realize I was facing the gates of my school the moment I finished my inner monologue. Let's get this degree, I guess. As the sun was starting to set, my classes were almost coming to an end. I waited for my professor to bid us goodbye and went through the door. I was getting my bike ready when I decided to take the long way home and passed by the building that I'm supposed to start working at tomorrow. I motioned my bike to a halt and stopped to admire the sheer magnificence of it all again. When suddenly, a black car parked at the entrance of a building. This looks like Philippe's car from last night. He might be on his way to the office now. But isn't it a little late? I mean, no judgment, but the sun is already set, and he just arrived to work now? He must have been in a hurry because he spared no time entering the building. He looked like he was mad even. I'm not immune to the rumors, and I know that Philippe is not famous because he is kind. In fact, quite the opposite actually. My dad told me that he's always angry, and that there's always someone in tears that exits the office every week. Long story short, he's got anger issues, and it's bad. Really bad. But somehow, I know that Philippe wasn't always this bad. That there's something good in him. Maybe he just needs someone to show him that there is something good in this world. I pondered on the thought, determined to stop the tingles that I felt since yesterday, and greeted me again once I saw his figure entering the building. My curiosity got the better of me, and I can't help but wonder why he arrives at the office at such odd hours. Dad, where are you? I shouted. I couldn't contain the tingles anymore, so I poured myself some cold water and chugged it all the way through. What seems to be the problem? Dad, when you were working with Philippe, at what time does he usually enter his office? I asked. Oh, usually after the sun sets. At first, I was weirded out, but I guess Philippe is just a superstitious guy. He replied, trying to remember the details. I see. Thanks, Dad, I spoke, still processing what happened earlier. I quickly changed into comfortable clothes and helped my father set up the table for dinner. The night was quiet and the only noise I could hear was the tingles on my stomach. They're quite loud if I do say so myself. Oh, Philippe, who are you and why are you making my stomach feel so warm? The morning came and I thanked God for not letting me be late this time. I went on with my morning routine with ease and ate my breakfast before getting my bike and going on my merry way. To say that I was excited was an understatement. I could not contain myself for the whole duration of my classes. The moment my professor went out the door, I immediately bolted my way out of class and on my way home. Hi, Dad, I replied, hurriedly entering my room. Now that I think about it, I was so excited to see Philippe today that I didn't have anything to wear. I'm not exactly the suit and tie person. While pondering on that, I heard my dad knock on the door. Hey, I figured today was your first day, so I decided to go out and buy you something, he said, while looking at me so fondly. I opened it, and it was a beautiful ultramarine suit that hugged my curves so softly. Thanks, Dad, I said while hugging him. I paired the suit with some white casual sneakers and bid my father goodbye before heading out. A million different scenarios are rummaging in my head as I was nearing the building. I was breathing so heavily when I got out on my bike. Little by little, I walked to the entrance of the building and held my breath as I took my first step inside. I'm finally here. I was too indulged at the sight of everything that I forgot the sun had just set. Wait, that means Sir Philippe is coming. I heard a woman shout. Several people made their way to the entrance and waited for Philippe's arrival. Not soon after, his black car parked in front of the entrance. I watched from the lobby that's not so far, so I could still see a glimpse of Philippe. Is this really how people greet Philippe every single day? Not really, just this week because they're afraid of being included in the second wave of the cutoff, I heard someone talking. I looked around and saw a woman approach me. Hi, I'm Richard. Nice to meet you, I started, attempting to make a conversation. Hi, I'm Gia, she said as she reached out her hand. I accepted it and asked her to clarify a few things. She just said, this seems not an everyday thing, just this week because they're afraid Philippe will fire them. I'm sure you've heard about the plans to rebuild the company. I'm guessing that's the reason why you're here. I was stunned. How did she figure that out? How did you know? I asked. Just a feeling, she said while smirking. I'll see you later. Sure, I replied. Not long after, the crowd died down and the building looked peaceful again. I went to the receptionist and asked which floor I'm supposed to go to for the orientation. 11th floor, I murmured curiously. I made my way to the 11th floor and saw myself standing in front of Philippe's office. God, I'm so nervous. I just wanted the floor to eat me. You're fired. Was that Philippe's voice? A woman soon exited his office with tears on her face. Oh no, poor thing. I guess the rumors are true. What's taking so long? Come in, I heard Philippe shout. I opened the door to his office, and I could not believe my eyes. Here I am, standing in front of the person I admired for so long, breathing the same air, seeing him in the flesh. So close, yet so far. Well, aren't you going to sit down? He said while gritting his teeth. I sat down immediately, not moving my eyes away from him. While he was still looking down, fidgeting his paperwork, he finally looked up, and there it was, our eyes meeting again. How I wish I could savor this moment. So you must be David's son, Richard. Oh my God, he knows me. Yes, sir, trying to contain my smile. I must have failed miserably, because after I said that, his frown just got deeper. Right, seeing as you fit the description I told your father, I don't see why I shouldn't hire you, he said while I nervously stayed in my seat. His eyes looked like they just saw a familiar face. However, my standards are as high as the mountains, so tell me, why should I hire you? He pursued as he stared at my orbs intently. I feel like I can melt at any moment. I'm here for my father. I owe everything to his sacrifices. It's time I offer him the same sacrifice back. But I don't want you to hire me because you pity me. I got a scholarship at one of the most prestigious schools in the country. My grades are astonishing, and I could be one of your best assets. It would be a shame if you let an opportunity like me go. And I also believe I can change your perspective on people for the better. I said so confidently. I noticed a smirk creeping up on his face. I could almost see his pearly whites. I see. Please follow my assistant for the promised orientation, he said, still with that charming smirk. I got up from my seat, and I can feel his gaze looking at my very soul. Or so I think, because if looks could kill, honey, bury me right now. I told you I would see you again. I whipped my head and saw Gia approaching me. How does this girl know where I am at all times? It's like she's put a tracker on me. Don't be scared. I'm not following you. I'm too pretty to be a stalker. Besides, I'm Philippe's assistant, she added. Oh my, I really thought she was just a normal employee. We walked around for a few and question just keeps popping into my head, seeing as she's his assistant. What a better way to know more about Philippe than through her. Hey, I've noticed people here don't really talk about Philippe. Is that like a company thing, or? I asked, hoping I was not too direct. Oh, it's because Philippe makes sure that everything about him is hidden from the world, she replied. But seeing him, he's like an epitome of confidence and bravery, I added. I mean, yes, he is every one of those things, but that's just the aura he likes to show everyone, she said while looking at the people in the building. I see, I replied. I never really thought of Philippe as the closed book where only he chose to show his cover. Maybe there's something to him that not everyone knows. Well, I'm here now, might as well find out why. I also wanted to ask about why Philippe arrives in such odd hours, but maybe she'll think that I'm just trying to get a better position from him. Oh, and one more thing. Dating your coworkers, and especially your boss, is a big no-no here. Better be careful, people get jealous very easily, Gia said. As she bid her goodbyes, I thanked her for being so welcoming and for showing me around. She told me that my work starts tomorrow, so I opted to go home early to prepare. I was nearing my bike when I felt a figure following me, so I stopped and turned my head to see who was following me. You rode a bicycle to work today? I stood there completely frozen at my spot. Aren't you going to answer me, or are you just deaf? He said angrily, his eyebrows almost meeting. I must have stood there for an awkward amount of time because he started tapping his feet. I just couldn't believe that I'm now in the presence of Philippe and is actually talking to me. Bury me now. Oh, sorry, yes, I stuttered. That's no good. The night is deep. It's not safe to bike alone, Philippe said. But I don't know how else to get home, I replied. Wait for me here. I'll just finish something, he said as he went back to the building. Did the Philippe just ask me to wait for him? A shooting star must have graced the sky because I don't understand how I got this lucky. A few minutes went by and I finally saw Philippe exiting the building. Wow, you really waited, he said, his face confused. Of course, you asked me to, I said blushingly. Come along, I will take you home. As he said that, a black car appeared in front of us. What about my bike? I asked. Don't worry, I'll take care of it, he replied. I was about to open the door when he suddenly grabbed my hand and reached for the handle, opening the door for me. You didn't have to do that, I said, quite embarrassed. Nonsense. I was raised as a gentleman, he retorted. The ride home was quiet, and only soft jazz music was heard on the radio. I can't help but stare at Philippe. How is a person with features so warm be so angry all the time? Hold on. Philippe, how do you know the road to my house? I asked in a suspicious tone, because I never told him the directions to anything. I just somehow do, he said almost shyly. Does he know something that I don't know? Before I opened the car door, Philippe suddenly grabbed my arm, forcing me to meet his orbs. Can I perhaps take you out to dinner tomorrow? He said, where hope is plastered all over his face. This night is just full of surprises. I can't believe Philippe is asking me such questions. I better be careful because I'm falling for this man hard. Like a date? I asked shyly. Like a date, he said while smiling. When I went inside the house, I couldn't help but feel over the moon. I was on cloud 9, and I was so happy that I didn't realize my father was already asleep. I didn't mind it though. All I could think about was the time I spent with Philippe. But something's still bugging me. That mole. I'm certain I've seen it before, but where? And it's impossible because the mole looked like it was unique, and it was Philippe's alone. I shrugged off my thoughts and readied myself for bed. Tomorrow went by, and just like every other day, I returned home to prepare myself to go to work. I realized that I left my bicycle last night. Now I have to figure out how to get to the company on time. I was about to hail a taxi when I saw a black car approach me. As it parked right in front of me, my dad went out of the house to look at the mysterious car. A tall figure emerged from the car. Me and my father were both shocked to see Philip here. Good morning, Mr. David. I'm here to pick up your son, he said with no emotion. I could not for the love of me comprehend what was happening right now. And so was my father, because it took him some time to reply to Philippe. They both were engaging in shallow conversation, with Philippe showing no signs of happiness at all. It was only when I interrupted that he flashed a sweet smile at me. May I? He asked as he opened the door for me. I quietly gestured him to do so as to not spark a reaction from my father. As we bid goodbye to my father, I could not help but notice a small smile on his face. Halfway through the trip, I decided to break the silence and ask him the question I was dying to know the answer to. Why did you pick me up? I said curiously, looking at him. I don't know. I just found myself driving into your neighborhood, almost as if it was natural to me. When he said that, a red tint showed itself and settled on his cheek. I looked at him intently, not knowing what to say until we finally arrived. And he went back to his stoic, emotionless aura. The sun has already set when we arrived. We both entered the building at the same time, receiving stares at every corner of the room. I can't help but feel so embarrassed. I then remember what Gia told me. I looked up to Philippe, but his eyes were just staring into the straight direction. It was all sorts of stares. I heard some murmurs as well. It was so uncomfortable that when we finally got to the elevator, I could finally breathe. Are you okay? He asked. He must have noted my body language, telling him I was uncomfortable. Yes, it's just the stairs were a little bit overwhelming, I replied honestly. Well, get used to it, he said, so sternly. What does he mean by that? But before I could ask him, the elevator spewed us to the 11th floor, and Philippe spared no time in entering his office. I followed him at the distance from the back and watched as the doors to his office closed. But before he went to his office, he told me something that left me unable to move. Don't forget our date. Meet me at the entrance later, he said while winking at me. I could not contain my smile so much that I didn't notice a woman looking at me and suddenly rolling her eyes, and in the blink of an eye, she suddenly approached me. Don't think I don't know what you're doing, dating our boss so you could be favored. You're disgusting and I hope you get fired, she said angrily while walking away. I didn't mind her and I just went to Gia's office for the work that I needed to do for the day. Before I knew it, the night was starting to get deeper and I waited for Philippe at the entrance. A few moments in, I saw his lone familiar figure. Not long did his car follow through too. Are you ready? He smiled so sheepishly. Ready as I could be, I said with much delight. As always, he opened the door for me. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought he took great pleasure in opening doors for me. We started the drive and the area looked so familiar. Maybe I've been here before? The road that we were taking, why is it so familiar? I asked. While looking through the windows, curious about the environment, Philippe just sat there with his hands on the steering wheel. His eyes were just staring at the road. It took him a while to answer, but when he did, I left him with a million different questions. You'll know soon, he said, trying to hide his sadness. We soon arrived at this family-owned restaurant. The ambience was warm and filled with soft lights, and the walls were covered with trinkets that the family treasured over the years. Something about this place feels so familiar, like I've stepped into these walls before. A kind lady gestured us to sit in a table for two, with a lone light above us. Are you comfortable? Philippe asked, breaking the silence. Yes, I'm just a bit confused, I said, looking at him directly in the eyes. I noticed that I'd become nervous at my action. I didn't mind because soon the kind lady gave us the menu. We gave her the dishes that we wanted and she said her thanks before running back to the kitchen and said, "Oh my, you guys are back," the kind lady said with glee. At this point, my eyes were glued to Philippe. He's avoiding my eyes. This is so unlike him. Something's going on, and I will find out why, one way or another. "Something is bothering you. Please tell me what it is," he asked, attempting to ease me. I wiped the edges of my mouth before I answered him. "Why is everything about you so familiar? Why is everything about you so warm? Why are you here, and why can I somehow remember the soft mole in your nose? Why?" I must have said that a bit louder because now everyone in this restaurant is staring at us. I just can't help it. It's killing me not knowing anything. He quietly drank his wine before looking at me subtly and gently. "Do you really not remember anything?" he asked, with hope in his eyes. "No, I don't, and unless you say anything, I might never remember anything," I said, fuming. "Let's finish our dinner in peace, and I'll take you back home," he replied quietly. After we finished our eating, I immediately went out of the restaurant because I felt like I was suffocating. I walked to Philippe's car and opened the door by myself. He followed shortly and put his keys to start the ignition. As the car hummed, I just stared into the window and tried so hard to remember this place. Not long after we left the area and turned into the city highway, the whole ride was just Philippe looking at me whenever he can and me just avoiding him. Around 30 minutes after we arrived at our neighborhood and he parked in our driveway, before I attempted to open the car door again. "Hear me please," I heard him. I sat down and waited for him to tell me everything. "Do you really not remember me, Richard?" he asked, his eyes almost pleading with me. "We've already met, years ago. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. You were walking around the streets, crying. I sympathized with you as I was just abandoned by my father," he started. "You sat down on a bench, and I walked towards you. He told me to sit down, and I wiped your tears, and it comforted you. You hugged me without saying anything, not afraid of a stranger. You just stayed. You asked me what was wrong, and you told me everything. You said you were hungry, so I took you to the restaurant that day. There was a reason why I took you here tonight. I hope that when I did, you would remember what happened that day. I will always remember what you told me. Be bold, be free, and be out," he said as he struggled to compose himself. "I never knew your problems, but I never knew your name. But then, I saw you cross the street from the building, and that was there that I knew that I found you again. That was when I swore to myself I would never let you go again. You changed something in me that day. The words that you told me stuck with me. Even after all these years, those simple words helped me to become the person that I am today," he said, finally succumbing to his tears. "I know all of this is overwhelming, but Richard, I want to greet the sun tomorrow with no regrets. So I ask you, can you be mine?" I was speechless. Everything was just too much. How could I not remember that day? How could I not remember Philippe? And why can't I answer his question? The only thing I could do was just hug him ever so tightly, not wanting to remove myself from his warmth. "Thank you for telling me, Philippe. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you. I promise to fix myself and come back to you and give you my answer," I said as I opened the door and walked to the house. Everything suddenly became crystal clear. All the pieces were suddenly coming together to show me everything that had happened. I cried and cried and cried the whole night away, and as tomorrow came, I saw a familiar silhouette. "Hi, how are you?" It was Philippe. "You're early today, not your usual hours," I replied, and he chuckled. "Why, don't you like it?" he asked. "I like it," I said. "And I like you," I continued. He froze, and his cheeks spotted some red hues. "Does that mean—" "Yes, Philippe," I said. "I'm now yours." He brought me to his car, and we decided to go to the office. We entered its doors with my head on his hand, and the doors opened. All eyes were on us. From the corner of my eye, I can see several diverse reactions: shock, pride, happiness, and disgust. "Don't mind them. Just focus on us. You're doing a great job," Philippe said as he looked at me. We parted ways as he went into his office and I went into Gia, giving her a helping hand when someone suddenly grabbed my hair and said, "I don't know how you did it, but you are so unfair. You don't deserve your position here. Are you dating our boss just to climb a higher position than us?" a girl shouted as she continued pulling my hair. Gia tried to help, but to no avail. "Enough," I heard Philippe. He grabbed me by my hand, and he asked me if I was okay. "Yes, me and Richard are dating, but he is not dating me to have a higher position. Richard is amazing, and he helps the company tremendously. His desire is to work, not to go up the ranks," he shouted, gathering everyone's attention. By now, they took out their phones and started recording us. "And if anyone here is prejudiced about our love, then feel free to leave the company and never come back. We're here for the youth, and the youth is diverse, with members of the LGBTQ+ community being part of it," he finished as he dragged me to the entrance where his car was parked. He rushed me home as soon as the tears bugged my eyes. When we arrived, I bid him goodbye and went to the house. When I saw my dad, he was watching the video of one of Philippe's members recorded. I had my doubts, but I'm guessing the rumors are true. He answered me with another question. Dad, words struggled to come out. My son, there's a reason why your mother and I are no longer together. I just can't accept that she would be the very person that prejudices you. I can't stand it, my son. If I were to choose between you and her, it's you, and always you, he finished, gradually wiping his tear as he spoke. I rushed to hug him so tightly, I couldn't bear to see my father crying. I don't want to lose you, my son. When you ran away from home as soon as you heard about the news that your mother was leaving, I felt like I was dying. I don't want it to happen again, he added. With those words came confusion to me. What do you mean, Dad? I asked. You left home for a few days. I looked for you everywhere. A few days of searching, a black car appeared in our driveway, and it took you home after the sun had set. You were so thin you couldn't speak because of exhaustion. I asked you what happened, but you told me you can't remember. I took you to the hospital, and they told me that the exhaustion disabled you to remember the things of before. I never asked anything further from you again. The only thing that you told me before the doctors told you were, I want you to be open and free, son. Love whomever you want to love, he said while looking at me dearly. Dad, I mumbled. I know, son, I know. I knew ever since you were a little boy. He spoke to me endearingly. We were both sobbing until a familiar black car parked itself at our driveway. You best be going now, said Dad. I kissed my father on the cheeks goodbye and greeted Philippe. Philippe opened the door for me, asked me if I wanted to see his home. Of course, I agreed. Thank you for staying, Philippe said. Always, I replied. We went outside to watch the sky, and it was there that he kissed me for the first time. As the sun sets, and so, my boss who had severe anger issues became my ever-so-charming boyfriend. Philippe went on to be much kinder to his employees, and his attempt to rebrand his company became successful, as it became famous in the youth market. For Gia, she had been promoted to the position of senior executive as a testament to her hard work. My dad had become content in his day-to-day life in the house, with gardening as his hobby. A few months after my employment, I graduated top of my class, and as then still continued to work at the company. Only now, it's part-time, because I am now focused on my last year in college. Dating the fearsome Philippe has never been less than joyous. The end. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.